There are crime films, there are action films, and then there are the rare movies that feel like someone took a crime novel, a character study, a Greek tragedy, a tactical manual, and a jazz album, and smashed them together into one flawless piece of cinema. That's Heat. Released in 1995, Heat is Michael Mann's neo-noir epic about cops, criminals, and the thin psychological thread that separates the two. On paper, it's a story about a cop trying to catch a thief. In practice, it's a 2-hour 50-minute meditation on obsession, loneliness, professionalism, and the cost of living by a code. This is the film that finally put Al Pacino and Robert De Niro face to face, after The Godfather Part 2 kept them on opposite sides of a time jump. It's the movie that convinced a generation of filmmakers that crime stories could be shot like operas with assault rifles, and it's the movie that made every future heist film wake up, look in the mirror, and quietly say, "Oh, we're not that good." So today, on Man vs. Movies, we're doing a full retrospective deep dive on Heat. Heat follows two professionals headed toward the same cliff from opposite directions. On one side, you've got Neil McCauley, played with icy minimalism by Robert De Niro. He's a career thief who treats crime like a precision craft. Neil lives by a brutal rule.
Don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner.
His life is lean, clean, and ruthlessly controlled. Until he meets Edie, a bookshop employee, and suddenly that neat, controlled philosophy starts bumping into messy human feelings. On the other side is Lieutenant Vincent Hanna, embodied by Al Pacino at maximum combustion. Hanna is an LAPD robbery homicide detective whose entire identity is built around catching people like Neil. His personal life is collapsing. His third marriage is disintegrating. His stepdaughter Lauren is slipping into depression. But he'll toss all of that into the fire if it means staying one step closer to his quarry.
Because I need it. It keeps me sharp, on the edge, where I gotta be.
The story kicks off with a meticulously planned armored truck heist. Neil's crew, Chris Shiherlis, played by Val Kilmer, Michael Toretto, played by Tom Sizemore, Trejo, played by Danny Trejo, and new recruit Waingro, played by Kevin Gage, hijack a truck carrying bearer bonds. The robbery should be clean, but Waingro ignores the plan and kills a guard, and a no witnesses policy turns a tidy theft into a triple homicide. That bloodshed puts them squarely in Hanna's crosshairs. From there, the movie settles into its rhythms. Neil plans one last big score, a downtown bank job that will set his crew up for life. Hanna methodically pulls at every thread: ballistics, informants, surveillance, tailing the crew through empty lots and shipyards. Along the way, we see parallel domestic implosions: Chris and Charlene's toxic marriage, Hanna's collapsing home life with his wife Justine and Lauren, Edie slowly realizing the quiet guy she met isn't just an engineer. He's basically Ocean's 1. Mann keeps coming back to the idea that these men are more alike than they are different. They're both compulsive professionals who only feel truly alive when they're doing their job. The difference is on which side of the law their compulsion sits. Everything builds towards two key pillars. The coffee shop scene where Hannah and Macaulay finally sit down and talk. No guns, no chase, no shouting. Just two men acknowledging that they understand each other so well that it's kind of tragic. That scene is based on a real coffee shop meeting between the actual detective, Chuck Adamson, and the real Neil Macaulay, man researched in Chicago. And the bank heist and downtown shootout, where Neil's crew hit a downtown Los Angeles bank in broad daylight, and Hannah's team intercepts them, leading to one of the most intense, realistic gun battles ever put on film. From that point onwards, it's a countdown clock. Neil tries to cut loose and escape. Hannah refuses to let him. And the film ends in that eerie blue-lit airport runway with one of the most quietly devastating final images in modern cinema. Hannah holding Neil's hand as he dies, like a man saying goodbye to the only person who truly understood him. Let me ask you, when you watch Heat, whose ending hits you harder emotionally? Neil's or the state Hannah is left in? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The roots of Heat go all the way back to the 1960s in Chicago. Mann spent years talking to Chuck Adamson, a Chicago detective who had hunted a real-life thief named Neil Macaulay. Adamson told Mann about his obsession with this criminal, how professional he was, how disciplined, and how there was a strange mutual respect between them. The most famous story is the coffee shop meeting. Adamson spotted Macaulay in a restaurant, walked up, and instead of arresting him on the spot, suggested they sit and have coffee. They talked, one-on-one, both fully aware that the next time they meet, they might try to kill each other. Not long after, during an attempted robbery, Adamson shot Macaulay dead. That poetic, fatalistic dynamic, two professionals acknowledging the inevitable, became the beating heart of Heat. Mann had it in his head for decades. In the late 1970s, Mann wrote a big sprawling script, often referred to as a Chicago police project, that contained the bones of Heat. The obsessive cop, the hyper-professional thief, the coffee shop meeting, the climatic showdown. He shopped it around. At one point he even offered it to Walter Hill, who turned it down. The script was long, about 180 pages in length, and Mann always imagined it as a feature film. But television came calling. In the late 80s, after Miami Vice and Crime Story, Mann was asked to develop another crime series for NBC. He took his Heat script, hacked it down to TV length, compressed entire subplots, and turned it into a 90-minute pilot called LA Takedown, focusing on the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division. The pilot was rushed, shot in just 19 days, far faster than Mann liked to work. NBC didn't like the lead actor as much as Mann did, wanted him recast. Mann refused. The pilot never went to series, and instead aired as a standalone TV movie in 1989. It's fascinating to watch now. You can clearly see the skeleton of Heat there, the coffee shop scene.
7 years in McNeil.
Yeah.
McNeil's no country club.
You looking to become a penologist?
You looking to go back?
the basic plot piece, but it feels like a sketch compared to the finished painting. Fast forward to the early 90s. Mann has just come off The Last of the Mohicans, which was a big success. For a while, he was planning a James Dean biopic as his next project. But in April 1994, he dropped that plan and went back to his old obsession, the story of Macaulay and Hannah. He committed to making a fully fleshed out film that LA Takedown had only hinted at, now called simply Heat. Warner Brothers backed the project. Mann's vision this time was clear. No compromises, a big canvas, and two of the greatest actors alive facing off at the center. Michael Mann had already built a reputation as a director obsessed with research and authenticity. Thief, Manhunter, Miami Vice, Crime Story, and Mohicans all show the same traits: meticulous detail, stylized visuals, and characters who live by codes. For Heat, Mann went further. He drew heavily on Adamson's real memories and hired Eddie Bunker, an ex-convict turned writer, as a technical consultant. Bunker's novel No Beast So Fierce was required reading for the cast, and his experiences informed the character of Nate, played by Jon Voight. Mann's approach: make the world of Heat feel like something you could walk into. Every job has procedure. Every cop has specific tactics. Every criminal has a personal history. Mann's inspiration for Neil wasn't just the real Macaulay. He also looked to French crime cinema, especially Alain Delon in Le Samouraï. That cool, minimalist, self-contained style deeply influenced how he wrote and directed Neil. Even the line, "I am alone, I am not lonely," echoes Delon's character. De Niro was Mann's first choice, and when he read the script, he jumped on board immediately. To build Neil, Mann gave De Niro huge backstory files, childhood history, early crimes, prison time, the whole psychological profile. Mann later reused some of that material for the novel Heat 2, which explores Neil's earlier life. De Niro plays Neil with incredible restraint. Small eye movements, soft voice, minimal gestures. He barely raises his voice, but you always feel the danger. This is a man who might have coffee with you, smile once, then shoot you in the head 15 minutes later if the mission requires it. If De Niro is ice, Pacino is an oil refinery about to explode. Mann always wanted Pacino as Hannah, and Pacino signed on quickly. Here's the twist. Pacino later revealed that he played Hannah as a guy who chips cocaine, a character detail that was written and even filmed in at least one scene, but removed from the final cut. In Pacino's mind, that explained why Hannah is so wired, so manic, randomly exploding in interrogation scenes and living at a constant pitch of adrenaline. So all those moments where he's shouting about,
Why'd I get mixed up with that bitch?
Because she got a great ass. And you got your head all the way up it.
and snapping through interrogation rooms, that's not just Pacino being Pacino. In his head, this is a man whose life is fueled by addiction on multiple levels. Addiction to the chase and chemically. What's crucial is that beneath the outbursts, Hannah is actually very smart. He's intuitive, reads crime scenes like diaries, and understands Neil on almost a spiritual level. The volatility is the price he pays for being unable to switch off. the role of Chris almost went very differently. At one stage, Keanu Reeves was offered the part but turned it down to do Hamlet on stage. John Bon Jovi even auditioned. In the end, Mann cast Val Kilmer, who was juggling this with Batman Forever. Kilmer threw himself into the physicality of the role. He did extensive weapons training and became so technically sharp that one specific moment, when Chris reloads his rifle during the bank shootout, has become famous in military circles. Kilmer later said he'd heard that Marines show that clip in training, telling recruits, "If you can't change a clip as fast as this actor, get out of my army." Chris is interesting because he's both Neil's most trusted soldier and one of the most emotionally compromised. He's deeply in love with Charlene, he's a gambling addict, and he represents everything dangerous about trying to live a domestic life while doing extremely non-domestic things like urban warfare in downtown LA. Tom Sizemore was in his prime in the 90s and had that perfect mix of danger and charisma. Mann gives him one of the most telling lines in the film. When Neil asks him if he wants to walk away, Toretto says,
Well, you know, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
That one sentence is basically this entire genre in a nutshell. Ashley Judd brings a lot of nuance to Charlene. She's not just the wife. She's savvy, running her own little life within the criminal ecosystem. For research, Judd met with former prostitutes who had become housewives to understand what it meant to move between those worlds and what compromises you make to survive in violent environments. Her motel balcony scene with Kilmer, where she silently warns him off with just a small hand movement, is one of the quiet triumphs of the film. Amy Brenneman originally didn't like the script. She later said she didn't care about these guys and their guns, which is exactly why Mann wanted her. He wanted Edie to feel like someone from an entirely different universe who stumbles into Neil's orbit. Her outsider energy makes their relationship feel fragile and doomed from the start. She's one of the few genuinely innocent people in the movie. A teenage Natalie Portman plays Lauren, Hannah's stepdaughter, struggling with depression and abandonment. She doesn't have a huge amount of screen time, but her subplot, especially her suicide attempt in the bathtub, brings home the collateral damage of Hannah's obsession with work. Nate is the fixer, the guy who greases wheels, gives Neil intel, and arranges fences. As mentioned, he's partially based on consultant Eddie Bunker, and Voight brings this lived-in, weary intelligence thing. On top of that, Mann stacks the deck with an outrageous ensemble of character actors. Dennis Haysbert as Donald, the ex-con whose attempt at going straight collapses into tragedy, Mykelti Williamson, Ted Levine, Wes Studi as Hannah's cops, each with a specific presence, and William Fichtner as slippery banker Van Sant. Critics often point out that Heat is one of those films where even the smallest roles are cast like leads. The score is by Elliot Goldenthal, who gives the film an eerie blend of orchestral and ambient sounds, industrial hum, mournful strings, and those drifting textures that turn the city into a kind of sonic ocean. Mann also layers in artists like Moby, most famously God moving over the face of the waters in the final scene, and other atmospheric tracks that make Heat feel almost like a long, nocturnal mixtape for haunted professions. Mann is notorious for preparation. For Heat, he took De Niro, Sizemore, and Kilmer to Folsom State Prison, so they could talk directly to real career criminals and see how they carried themselves, how they thought, how they rationalized their lives. On the law enforcement side, Mann drew on former cops like Adamson and others he'd been working with since Thief and Manhunter, building detailed procedural authenticity into every step of the investigation. The gun handling in Heat isn't movie cool, it's tactically correct. The cast underwent significant weapons training, live fire exercises, movement drills, learning how to shoot, reload, and move as teams. During the downtown shootout, Val Kilmer's mid-battle reload is so clean that actual military trainers reportedly now use it as an example in training. So yes, Heat has literally become a teaching tool for real soldiers. That's how far the authenticity goes. And let me ask you, is there any other movie where you've noticed gun handling or tactics and thought, okay, they actually did their homework? Put your suggestions in the comments below. Mann insisted that Heat be shot almost entirely on real locations in Los Angeles, not on sound stages. He and location managers Janice Polly and Laurie Bolton scouted obsessively from August to December 1994, looking for places that hadn't already been shot to death in other movies. In the end, fewer than 10 of the 85 locations had been used before. They shot in real houses, real diners, real industrial areas, freeways, motels, high-rises. Mann wanted LA to feel lived in and sprawled, not like a postcard. One of the most challenging locations was Los Angeles International Airport, where the finale was filmed. The crew nearly lost a chance to shoot there due to a security threat linked to the Unabomber at the time, which gives that entire runway sequence an extra layer of "we almost didn't get this." The bank heist and subsequent street shootout are legendary, and part of what makes them so visceral is the sound. Mann didn't want canned gunshots dubbed in later. Instead, he used multiple microphones placed around the real downtown location and recorded the live weapons fire with blanks on the day. That's why the gunfire in Heat sounds so different from most Hollywood action films. It's chaotic, echoey, overwhelming, bouncing off glass and concrete. When critics and filmmakers talk about the greatest shootout ever filmed, this is the one they point to. It's not just noisy, it's structured. You can follow tactics, flanking moves, withdrawal, suppression fire, the moment the cops realize they're outgunned and the civilians are in deadly danger. And in the middle of all that chaos, Mann never loses sight of characters. Chris's desperation, Neil's calm, Hannah's refusal to back down. Heat was released in December 1995, running a very bold 170 plus minutes at a time when studios were a lot more nervous about long runtimes. It cost around $60 million to make and grossed approximately $187 million worldwide. A solid success, if not a monster juggernaut on the level of, say, Jurassic Park. Critically, it did very well from the start. On Rotten Tomatoes, it currently sits around 84% approval, with Metacritic giving it a score in the mid-70s, indicating generally favourable reviews. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars out of 4, praising the film's psychological insight and calling Mann's script uncommonly literate, especially in how it allows characters to articulate their interior states instead of just quipping between gunshots. Over time, its reputation only grew. Critics have since called it the greatest heist movie ever made, citing that central bank robbery as not just the best robbery sequence, but also the most influential, inspiring films like The Dark Knight and The Town in their structure, mood, and approach to realism. Awards-wise, Heat didn't dominate Oscars the way people might imagine in hindsight, but it was nominated across various bodies, Saturn Awards, Critics Associations, and others, including nods for Best Action Adventure Film and Acting categories. What's more interesting than awards though, is how it's aged. On re-release, retrospectives, and critics lists, Heat now routinely ranks among the greatest films of the 1990s, the greatest crime films ever made, and Mann's career-defining work. Heat's fingerprints are all over later crime films. Christopher Nolan has openly cited it as a major influence on The Dark Knight, from the big city crime sprawl and intercut storylines to the way the movie focuses on the duality between a crime fighter and a master criminal.
Never start with the head. The victim gets all fuzzy.
You can feel Heat's DNA in the bank heist opening of The Dark Knight, and in the overall tone of urban dread and tactical realism. Other crime films like The Town and many modern heist thrillers take cues from Mann's insistence on plausible tactics, grounded sound design, and focusing just as much on preparation and aftermath as on the bang bang in the middle. Visually, Heat's cool blue nocturnal LA has basically become the template for neo-noir cityscapes. Wide shots of empty threeways, sodium orange streetlights, glass towers glowing in oppressive blues and greens. Then there's the real world side. In 1997, two heavily armored men robbed a Bank of America branch in North Hollywood and engaged in a massive shootout with Los Angeles police. More than 2,000 rounds were fired, 12 officers and 8 civilians were injured. The event is known as the North Hollywood Shootout. Documentaries and reports have repeatedly suggested that the robbers were inspired by Heat, especially the idea of using assault rifles and heavy firepower in an urban robbery and shootout. Some coverage explicitly frames the event as inspired by the film Heat, although the degree of direct influence is debated. What's not debated is the aftermath. The shootout led to changes in police armament. Many departments in the US started issuing patrol officers semi-automatic rifles and heavier weaponry, because standard sidearms and shotguns had proven inadequate against heavily armored criminals. So you have this strange feedback loop. Mann's film is inspired by real crime, then possibly helps shape real criminals, which then reshapes real policing. As mentioned earlier, the Marines and other military units have reportedly used Kilmer's reload and parts of the shootout in weapons training, because the choreography and technique are that solid. Among film fans, Heat has become a sort of rite of passage. People quote it, meme it, do analysis videos on the diner scene, the final shot, or Pacino's more volcanic line deliveries. It's both serious cinema and endlessly rewatchable cult favourite. Michael Mann eventually returned directly to this world with Heat 2, a novel co-written with Meg Gardiner and released in 2022. It serves as both prequel and sequel, diving into Neil's earlier life, Chris's backstory, and Hannah's formative cases, while also following Chris after the events of the film into new territory across North and South America and Southeast Asia. The book hit the New York Times bestseller list and reignited wider discussion about Heat's universe. Mann is now developing Heat 2 as a feature film. Recent reports indicate that the project has gone through budget discussions, with Warner Brothers initially balking at a projected cost north of $200 million and looking for co-financing with the streamer. Leonardo DiCaprio, Adam Driver, and Austin Butler have been heavily rumoured as potential casting choices, though no casting has been formally confirmed yet. More recently, tax incentives have made it possible for Mann to plan shooting Heat 2 back in Los Angeles, bringing the story home again. So Heat isn't just a classic that sits on a shelf. It's now an expanding crime saga, with Mann still personally steering the ship decades later. For me, Heat is the Michael Mann movie. It's the film where everything he does well, atmosphere, procedure, psychology, visual style, all clicks into one perfect system. The direction is immaculate. Mann balances an enormous ensemble without losing emotional focus. Every side character feels like they have their own movie happening just off screen. We get just enough to feel the weight of their choices without drowning in subplots. The acting is top tier. De Niro distills decades of character work into a performance that's basically pure, controlled presence. Pacino channels chaos, but never loses intelligence. Kilmer plays a man caught between love and self-destruction. Judd, Brenneman, Voight, Portman, Haysbert, Sizemore, no one phones it in. The editing and structure are bold. Mann is not afraid of quiet interludes, long, wordless driving shots, characters alone in rooms, moments where people just look out over the city. Those pauses make the bursts of action feel even more violent and destabilizing. Thematically, the film nails one of my favorite things in crime cinema. The idea that the cop and the criminal are two expressions of the same obsession. Both live by a code. Both sacrifice domestic happiness for the chase. Both are emotionally stunted in different ways. In another life, they might have been friends or co-workers. In this life, they're destined to stand on opposite sides of an airport runway, one living, one dying, both having lost something they can never get back. And yes, I absolutely see Heat as one of the greatest movies ever made. It's a masterpiece of genre filmmaking that transcends its genre. It's a crime film for people who like tactical realism, but it's also an opera for people who like tragic character studies. It's a cops and robbers picture that somehow manages to be about loneliness, work, compromise, and the impossibility of having it all. Everyone is at the top of their game. The directing, acting, editing, sound, score, it all hits perfectly. And that's our deep dive into Michael Mann's Heat, a film born from real Chicago crime stories, sharpened in a failed TV pilot, and resurrected into one of the most influential crime epics ever made. If you've stuck with me through this full breakdown, you're officially as dedicated as Neil McCauley planning a score, or Vincent Hanna running on 0 sleep and 12 espressos. If you enjoyed this Man vs. Movies retrospective, drop a comment with your favourite scene, tell me which character you think gets the most underrated arc, and let me know if you're excited or terrified about Heat 2. Hit like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps more than Hannah screaming,
Don't waste my motherfucking time!
This, for me, is Michael Mann's magnum opus. A masterpiece of crime cinema and one of the greatest films ever made. Thanks for watching Man vs. Movies, where the action is, hopefully, always the juice. And remember, if you feel the heat around the corner, maybe pause, hit subscribe first, then walk away in 30 seconds or less.